I don't get it. What do they have that we don't?
Good bodies. So he can throw her over his shoulder. Big deal.
He should use his legs more. He's gonna throw out his back.
When you pretend to have or be something, you need to do so wholeheartedly and consistently. Second, your efforts must be systematic. Reality rarely changes overnight. You need patience, determination, and a willingness to keep planning, even when nothing seems to shift right away. It is precisely when reality loses patience with your unwavering performance
Who the hell
that it
is
begins to
Jesus
respond.
H. Garcia?
Carefully collect information
It's your new identity.
in an effort to plot some sort of revenge. But someone who's psychopathic and narcissistic
what's so geeky about us anyway?
So
Gentlemen,
they might
good
have
news.
some of the different
Dungeons and Dragons
characteristics
hands
from Machiavellianism, like
We're gonna have
impulse
fun
control,
Friday night.
that allow them to gather information,
Could you
analyze
not
it, and kind
humiliate me
of
in
plot
front of
out
the
a
whole
revenge
school?
strategy.
Just trying to help.
So this really shows how some of the
You're not
dark
one of
triad traits really work together
I don't think I
to
want to be a man
end up
anymore.
with certain results,
Things are different
like
now.
planning something like
You're
revenge
different now.
somewhat carefully. So moving on to the next area, another
Girls
subtle
never
sign
like
here
us.
would be around
You're so
admitting
easy to talk
when somebody's
to.
wrong. So
You're
if
just
somebody
like my sister.
is doing something wrong or has done something wrong
Lindsay has a boyfriend.
and they're reluctant
Not
to
another
admit
one of
it.
those burnouts.
So let's use an example here of,
Absolutely
in a
forbid you
workplace
from
setting,
seeing
somebody
his
has a
boy.
proposal. Let's say it's like an
Wanna
IT
make out or
proposal.
something?
They have this
All
idea
guys wanna make
how to improve information
I just
technology
wanna
in a
hold
company. And they send it up for approval. Let's say it's like an IT proposal. Denied. This idea is really not well improve information technology in a company steps, and they approved. So they typically would not admit that it was their failures that caused the rejection of the proposal. They might say that, well, this project was doomed from the beginning. It was never going to be approved no matter what I did. They might also say, and this kind of
I shaved it.
connects back to something I said earlier in terms of like a pattern here. They might say, well, I knew it would fail all along, and that was the plan. It was really something I had to do, and there's more to it that you don't see. So what they're really saying there is it didn't fail, in a sense, because all along it was somehow the plan that they would do all this work, and they would send it up for approval, and it would get denied. They could also suggest that it's really more complex than you would know. I hear this a lot. So like not offering explanation, just saying, oh, there's more to it than you can imagine. It's really complex. There's a lot to this that's going on that you don't know, or you're not at a level where you're allowed to know. So again, we're kind of looking more at narcissism there, that arrogance and condescending attitude. So the last area I'll cover here, the last area of subtle signs for the dark triad, is around use of language. And we see a few different things here. One thing I've noticed with the dark triad is if somebody tends to use a lot of what I'll call fancy words when they know that the person they're talking to is not going to understand, because maybe they already used that word before and the person didn't understand, so it's like they keep going with that, right? So they'll use these technical terms or just really unusual words, like for example from the English language, and say it to a person as if they should know, and kind of implying that they don't know, they're not really smart enough to be in that conversation. So kind of, in a sense, weaponizing fancy language. Another angle in this is not admitting when they don't know a quote-unquote fancy word, right? So I remember a while ago working with this assessment that had different items on a list. It was a 10-item assessment. And there was this clinician, then she used this assessment, and when she would reach the 9th item, she would say to the client, we're on the penultimate item, right? And that's the correct use of that word, penultimate. It means second to last, because ultimate means last. Now there's a noun version of ultimate that means the highest level of achievement, but here we're talking about the order in a list. And what she noticed from using this structured intake many times was that a lot of people would immediately say, oh, what does penultimate mean? What does that mean? And she would say, oh, it means second to last, on the 9th item out of 10. And other people would say, oh, this is the best item, like, again, misunderstanding what penultimate means. But then later on, when she would go back and talk to them, those that had the dark triad traits were more likely to kind of defend that position of understanding the word penultimate incorrectly. So they wouldn't admit they didn't understand it. So she would say, oh, I noticed that you thought that meant it was the best item, It's just the second to last. That's what penultimate means. And they might say something like, oh, well, that's one definition of penultimate. Yeah.